Hey, basketball fans, welcome to another episode of your favorite WNBA show, Around the Rim. No longer a podcast, now a YouTube show. Thank you to everyone who has been following us and taking this journey with us from our podcast days to now you get to see our faces. Well, Terrika's face.
LaChina's face, which is fabulous today.
Girl, for today. You know how I've been rolling up until this point. But there's so much happening in the WNBA, and that's our job. Terrika and I, it's our job to basically recap what's happening, give you our thoughts, opinions, look ahead to things that are going on. And lo and behold, there were a number of people that predicted that the Liz Cambage, and I'm going to call it marriage to the LA Sparks. You'll find out why I call it a marriage in a moment, but that it may not make it through the season. And ladies and gentlemen, if that was your prediction, you are correct. It was announced that there has been a divorce between Liz Cambage and LA. Now, boy, this story goes way, way back, right? Because Liz played in Tulsa, got drafted there, then to Dallas, then to Vegas, now to LA. Everyone kind of felt like she was on her last leg, kind of, because of how much she had moved around. There were rumors that, the teams that she had played on weren't necessarily always happy with her attitude. She wasn't necessarily always happy with things that were happening. So there was, but you can't trust any of that. All we know, I'm not gonna say we can't trust it. We can't confirm or deny it on this show. What we can tell you is that this is a huge blow for the LA Sparks when you look at their playoff aspirations as well as their championship aspirations. But Terrika, let's just start with, what was your reaction to hearing that Liz and LA were getting a divorce?
Well, first and foremost, I really think we need to figure out where this term contract divorce comes from, right? It is not new in any sport for people to leave their teams, even in the middle of a season. That's not new. We've seen it happen before across many major sports, but only in 2022, in the Women's National Basketball Association, have I heard it coined a contract divorce. For why? I do not know who created it. I do not know why you created it, but my dear friend and colleague, whoever you were who thought this was a great way to characterize a basketball player leaving their team, do not ever do that again. It is not a contract divorce. Just please stop. I don't like it. It's only characterizing women's sports. It's just, I do not like it, right? But overall, I am not surprised, very similarly to how I was not surprised when Tina Charles left. I wasn't surprised. I think all season long, we have seen glimpses. And to be real with you, LaChina, LA ain't been right since Derek Fisher benched Candace Parker in 2019.
You always take it back to that team.
This team ain't been right it's not been right ever since. The juju hasn't been right. Nothing about this team has really been what we thought it would be ever since then. And I'm not one that's into, conspiracy theories or anything, but I'm just saying there's a bad something that's going on in LA, and it feels like it started at that moment. You lost Candace, you lost Chelsea, both of which are thriving, and then you haven't been able to build a serious chemistry with this team. Now Derek Fisher is out. You were excited about Liz Cambage coming to this team at the beginning of the season. There was so much, it was literally one of the splash moves of the offseason, and nothing about her presence on that roster has panned out the way that any of us assumed that it would be. Yesterday, there was an article that was released by Chris Haynes at Yahoo that went into some details about what the locker room culture was like around her. Again, this is just what his sources has told him, that, there was confusion in terms of numbers and what jersey number she would wear. Then there was attitudes about her getting touches in the paint. Then there was attitudes about her missing games. We still don't know what the true nature of her relationship was with Nneka and Chiney after the comments came out about what she said about Team Nigeria, knowing that Nneka and Chiney are two very proud members of a Nigerian descent. So currently fighting for a spot on the Nigerian national team. So there were so many things that showed us why this could not work. And we wanted it to work, but it didn't. So I'm absolutely not surprised. Again, always surprised that it happened when it happened, but it feels like this was just, a disaster waiting to happen over the course of time. How about you?
You summed it up perfectly, T. But what I will say for those of you that may not know how huge this is, like how big of a deal this is, Elizabeth Cambage was a 4-time WNBA All-Star, was the runner-up for WNBA MVP in 2018. 6'8", is a low down low, can space the floor, is one of the best players in the world, has been since she was probably 16. You know her from her days playing for the Australian national team, came over to the US. I mentioned was drafted to Tulsa. The story goes on from there. So when LA picked up Liz Cambage, I was like, okay, this is huge. This is huge for them on the court because last year they needed scoring. They needed rebounding. She fits both of those things. Questionable because there had been some tumultuous relationships with Liz and some of her prior teammates, organizations, again, according to sources. Speaking of sources, was it Ball Out Media that broke this? I'm trying to remember who the source was. I wanted to give them some love. Okay, so they had the tea on this whole Liz is moving thing. Wanted to give them a little shout out. So I was excited for LA because I was like, you know what? If Liz is ready to do this thing, the rumors were she was always trying to get to LA. Like, this is the team she wanted to play for multiple reasons, because Liz also has off the court. I mean, she's a beautiful girl. I mean, could be a full-time model if she wanted to, had other things going on. So it was like, she always wanted to be in LA. She once shared an agent with LaChina and as well. And so, that was at some point, at least a thing for her trying to get to the LA area. I believe they've parted ways since then. So there's just a lot of storylines, but you're absolutely right in that, first of all, things haven't gone well for LA since the Candace Parker benching. But I was excited about what they could be with the addition of Liz Cambage in this new roster that they put together in the offseason that I thought was really, really good. And I still think is good. I will get to that in a moment. However, basketball is more than X and O's. And whatever was going on in the days and the ins and outs, the practices and everything like that seems to have come to a head. And for those of us that have followed the career of Liz Cambage, it's not surprising because something always seems to go awry. And I've had lots of conversations with Liz over the years, and she and I have always connected. Like, I think Liz is a tremendous player, but was LA going to be the right fit for her? Apparently not, for all of the reasons you mentioned. Now, the question is, what happens to Liz moving forward? I believe we've seen the last of Liz Cambage in the WNBA. I don't think that there is a team in this league, given the past history of recent seasons of some things that have happened on and off the court, and even internationally, I would say with her Australia team. I don't know that there's a team in this league that's going to be like, hey, well, we want Liz. Do they want her as far as what she can do on the court? Absolutely. But you're taking a gamble, because there is a history there. And we all listen to the blogs and things like that. Like, it's easy to say, well, yeah, you just let Liz be who she is. And that's easier said than done. Like, coaches make calls, they do their research, GMs do the same. So I believe we've seen the last of Liz Cambage in the WNBA. My question for you, T, is what do you see happening moving forward for the LA Sparks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I agree with you that I don't think Liz is going to play again in this league. But I think LA now, they are a team who has had to play without Liz on many occasions throughout the season. So they do know how to play without her. They do know how to win without her. Nneka Ogwumike is going to have to continue to play like the MVP that she is. I think Chiney is going to have to continue to give good minutes, stay healthy as much as she can. She's missed a few games this year, but if she can stay healthy, I think Olivia Nelson-Ododa is someone who's going to see more minutes. I think it's possible. Now, earlier, I did say on a previous show that I don't think that LA is going to be a postseason team. I felt at the time that, Minnesota had a better schedule moving forward than LA did, and that they could slide in and LA could slide out, because I do think that Dallas and Atlanta remain. Not sure if that's still the case, if they can continue to ride this wave. And Minnesota has lost some games that maybe they shouldn't have. So that might not necessarily be the case. If they do get into the postseason, it's going to be short-lived. I just don't think they have enough compared to the top 5 teams in this league to really make any noise. And to be honest, I'm not sure if the chemistry on that team is good enough to carry them even through, the first round against some of the other teams. So that's just me. But I think Nneka is a leader. I think that Chiney is a leader. And I think that they have the kind of voice and the kind of presence and the kind of reputation. They do as much off the court as they do on it. They lead by example. And Nneka for sure is someone who's going to continue to fight. So I'm not throwing in the towel in terms of saying their season is over, because again, they've had to deal with this adversity all season long. So it's not brand new. But I think what's the real question is, what do you do from here in this offseason to kind of right this ship? First, you're going to have to figure out, from a leadership standpoint in the front office. I think that's something that we don't talk about a lot that we need to. There has been questions about front office leadership in terms of the decision-making with this team for quite a while now. And I don't think that it's truly been addressed. I think it's kind of just been, we're putting a Band-Aid over it and we're just going to keep riding by it. But I think that's the real question that we need to ask, do there need to be, or does there need to be front office changes for this organization in order for it to get back on the right track of what we've known this storied franchise to be? Would love to hear your thoughts on that, LaChina, on whether or not you see, but I think that's the first thing. And then you're going to need to secure a coach. And that's no shade whatsoever to Fred Williams, that if that's the direction that this team wants to go in, for sure. But I certainly wouldn't mind, as we talked about previously, Simone Augustus is there. What better person to give an opportunity to, or to put in a position as someone who's been there, who's done it, who knows what it takes to win, who knows what it's like to lead, and someone who players respect. So that's something that I think we need to move forward with. And then once you can get your front office and your coaching staff on one accord, I think at that moment, you can then decide, how do we shape this roster to make us a winning team? But in terms of the 2022 season, at best, they make the first round.
I actually disagree that this move for Liz Cambage has any impact on the aspirations of the LA Sparks whatsoever. And saying that, I've always felt like LA could be a championship contender, and I still believe they could. This is why. I really believe that this LA Sparks team could be very special on the defensive end of the floor. When you look at what they have defensively, yes, they no longer have the size of Liz Cambage on the interior. You're going to miss her shot blocking, right? But you can now play with some pace off of your defense that you weren't able to do with 6'8", trying to get up and down the floor. You play a little bit smaller with a Chiney Ogwumike, who has been exceptional in her resurgence this year. Your fingers crossed that she stays healthy, knock on wood. Then you add to that 4-time all-defensive team member in Nneka Ogwumike, 2-time all-defensive team member in Brittany Sykes, member of the WNBA all-defensive team, I believe in 2019, Jordan, Canada. And the way that this team could really pressure the ball, lock you up from several positions, like the offensive chemistry, especially with all the pieces they've had moving in and out this year. I mean, the injuries, they have been through a lot. Between COVID, injuries, and starting 8 of 10 games on the road, LA has had a rough. Right. And this is the team that is probably needed to have some continuity with all the new faces. So the offensive chemistry may not be there, but defensively, I think they could be really special. Candace Parker always gives credit to Coach Trammell. I believe she's still in charge of the defense. And I just think that this team could really gel on that end. I like what we're seeing developing between Lexi Brown, and Lexi Brown is also a better defender. I remember her back at Duke playing at the top of that matchup zone. She's pesty. Like she can get after it. But she and Katie Lou Samuelson starting to hit some shots from long range. Nneka is an MVP candidate. I mean, Nneka's good. Will Christy Tolliver get healthy? That would be an added piece, especially going into the playoffs. So I'm going to stop short of saying they need Kennedy Carter, but They need what Kennedy Carter can do between the lines. That's all I'm saying. Like,
they do.
She does some things where you just like, that girl's special.
I love Kennedy. I have always, you know this, I've always been a fan of Kennedy. She is, and I think the same can be said for Jordan, right? Like, you still have a Jordan Canada back there too, who had an opportunity to learn from Super for how many years. She's great when she's on the court. She has, I think Kennedy has great court. I think Jordan has great court awareness, and they need to utilize that. And so then you also look at, like we kind of touched on a little bit last week, they've got Minnesota, they've got Phoenix. Like, they're not facing anyone ahead of them in the standings, so they have an opportunity to build some cushion in terms of, getting some wins to be able to secure themselves. You went a little bit further than I did talking about championship pedigree, because did you say Las Vegas last night?
Well, and before we move on, let me just say this really quickly, because you did ask me a question about front office. Things need to be done there. They have a new president in Vanessa Shea, who was hired just in May. So I'm gonna give homegirl a little time to get in and get her feet wet and possibly make some changes to see how that goes in the offseason. But I agree with you. But yes, in closing, well, two things. If this was the end of us seeing Liz Cambage in the WNBA, Liz, it's been real. The impact that you had in terms of your openness around your mental health, I think is the thing that will stick with me. And that she was open and honest about those struggles, right? In a way that hit home for many of us. But we're gonna miss you, girl.
It kind of is what it is.
I knew you were gonna say that. Okay, but really quickly, back to Vegas and Chicago. Your biggest takeaway. I'll tell you my biggest takeaway from the Commissioner's Cup, and then you tell me yours, I'll tell you mine.
Okay. Biggest takeaway for me was consistency without depth from Las Vegas. We have talked all season long about how they are not a deep team and how that could possibly play a role later on in the season when you need that depth in order to continue to push. And last night, there were moments and there were spurts where we thought Chicago was going to come back very similarly to they did in that 28-point comeback a few weeks ago, but they were able to remain consistent. They were able to remain defensively sound. And Chelsea Gray, I don't know why God blessed you the way that he did with everything that you have, Chelsea, but ma'am, you and Kelsey Plum, you can do nothing with them. So that was my takeaway.
Excuse me.
Oh boy. Okay.
Post players enter the chat. Excuse me. I believe Asia Wilson had 17 rebounds and 6 blocks. Okay. Entering the chat. But no. So my biggest takeaway, and I know we've got to wrap, is this. Vegas was fine when it was just that, when they were shorthanded. They kind of started to struggle as they needed to get some people in that rotation and tinker with those lineups a little bit in order to grow that depth, right? That's part of growing. Yeah. What you hope happens is we got Raquana, we got Rupert, we got Kia Stokes. We're getting these pieces in, so this is going to make us better on the back end. Because they were fine when it was just that small group. Then they hit, those stretches. But I also believe that they have to continue to move the ball. That is the number one thing for me when it comes to Vegas. When I watched them play against Atlanta, that's how Atlanta beat them. They started coming down, taking first shot. They're so good on offense, they don't have to do that. Dearica Hamby last night had like 4 assists in her first 7 minutes of play. She needs to be a catalyst. Everyone was passing the ball last night. They were sharing the ball. Even though each of them is so talented, I think that assist number makes them even more dangerous. They're different when the ball is moving. And Becky has talked about that all season long to them, about sharing the ball, being good teammates, all those things. So I still think that for me, Chicago is still my favorite to win. I know they didn't look great last night. I do think they were trying to get Sloot back in. Yeah. And that was a byproduct of that. Some of that I'm not taking any credit away from Vegas because they were just nasty. But I don't know if that's the outcome if these two teams meet again.
I don't know. We will see. I cannot not be a fan and say that I must hope that Connecticut will some way finagle themselves in here. But with all of that being said, before we go, I have to give some love to Bria Hartley. It came out today that she did tear her ACL in her left knee. And it's so unfortunate. I had a conversation with Bria on last week, and she was just so excited to be back, so happy to have the opportunity to play again. She's worked so hard, and to kind of have this happen to her, it really does break a lot of our hearts. So shouts out to you, sis. Prayers up to you that you come back stronger and better than ever.
Bria, we got your back, man. We know you've been through a lot, moving teams, injuries, all that stuff. Just know we love you. You are strong. Yep. You are so strong. And on those days when you're not, just depend on us. We got your back, sis.
We got you.
You will. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Don't forget, hit us on Twitter at Around the Rim Pod. And you can email us at aroundtherimpodcast@gmail.com.